right, well, good afternoon, councillors. Thank you for those who are here in attendance and those who are tuning in. So as we open today's ordinary meeting at 1 p.m. on the unceded lands of the original and ongoing owners of the land, the Palawa people, we declare it open 1 p.m. here at Town Hall. Thank you. Be seated. We do have an apology here today from Professor Raze. Otherwise, we are in full attendance at agenda item number 1. Agenda item 2, Mayor acknowledgements. I'd like to thank the Deputy Mayor for stepping in for the last fortnight and for the councillors for the way in which they've been able to continue and conduct the work for our municipality as I was at Gastronomy Conference. Moving forward to declarations of interest at number 3. So a councillor must declare any interest that a councillor has in a matter before any discussion on that matter commences. Do we have any declarations of interest today? There being none, we'll move forward to the confirmation of minutes at 4. Recommendation is that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of the City of Launceston Council held on the 2nd of May be confirmed as a true and correct record. Someone to move? Councillor Palmer. A second to Councillor Harris. All of those in favour? That's all councillors present. The motion is carried. Agenda item 5, council workshops. 5.1, council workshops report the 2nd of May. Oh, yes, thank you. There will be an amendment to this. So before we go to the mover and the seconder, we will just do a little update. I'll go through that. So the recommendation is that council notes the council workshops conducted and attended since the last meeting for these purposes described: the Albert Hall site visit and project update, Princess Theatre update, homelessness statement of intent, community consultation outcome, business events Tasmania, recreational open space, and we'll make the amendment here before we move that the UTAS transition arrangements has been postponed and will be rescheduled. And we did have the Gateway workshop today and an update around the conversation in... Okay, gotcha. So just moving the UTAS transition arrangements to being postponed. Councillor Gibson, a further amendment?
No, thanks for that. I think what I heard is because we had the presentation, it's still in there. Is that correct? Yeah. So I'd like to move it, and I'd like to, sorry, I'll wait for a second.
Moved by Councillor Gibson, seconded by Councillor Dawkins. Councillor Gibson.
I was just going to say I'd really like to pull out the Business Events Tasmania presentation. It was really great to hear of the successful bids that have been achieved on Northern Tasmania's behalf. We know that the significance in terms of the growth of that industry is bouncing back as a result of COVID, and we know importantly through the work and the partnership with Visit Northern Tasmania, increasingly our City of Gastronomy designation, indeed our own redeveloped tourism and event strategies that will be coming forward this calendar year, that we're really in a great place. So we look forward to that business event conferencing only continuing to grow.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. Councillor Dawkins is the seconder. Any comments around the table? Re-workshops? Anything further to close, Councillor Gibson? Okay. Taking it to the vote then. All of those in favour? That's all councillors present. The motion is carried. Councillors' leave of absence applications as a part of agenda item number 6. Councillors' leave of absence applications will be considered in closed council at agenda item 15.3. Councillors' leave of absence. So at community reports, we don't have any identified as a part of this agenda today. Moving to public question time. 8.1 is public questions on notice. 8.1.1, Andrew Whitehead around parking receipts. 8.1.2, Kirsten Ritchie around the Strike It Out Sleep Pod proposal. 8.1.3, Robin Smith parking infringements. 8.1.4, Robin Smith also around graffiti in Brisbane Street Mall and further parking infringements. 8.2 is public questions without notice. Noting that the rules and regulations are displayed and available upon entry, you may ask a total of 3 questions each. Do we have any questions without notice from the public? Thank you. If you wouldn't mind moving to the microphone and just your name and suburb.
My name is John Chaplin and I live at Windermere.
Thank you.
Now, my question is to the council about clarification of excessive noise. There is a farm opposite me that has for 5.5 hours flown planes over my property, and I'm directly in line with their grass airstrip. Now, I haven't been given notice for that. I've asked the planning department of the Launceston Council if they could clarify that. They said that farmer has an exemption if he is spraying superphosphate, but I've spoken to Air Services Australia, and we're not. And these planes are supposed to fly at a minimum of 500 feet above my house. And for 5.5 hours, these crop dusting planes or planes practicing to take off and land, we're not doing that, right? So that's my thing, is to try and get clarification whether that's true. The farm in question is quite small, and it would take about half an hour to crop dust his property. But for 5.5 hours, planes, there were 3 to 4 planes in constant rotation, flying over my house, thinking they are superphosphating someone else's farm as well. So to the point where I actually had to leave my house. So I can start talking about castles in my home and that sort of stuff, but we won't go there. So that's pretty well the nub of what I've got to do, just to try and get clarification for it.
Thank you, Mr. Chaplin. Appreciate the question.
Right.
I will take that question on notice because
That's
there is
fine.
quite
Yes,
a bit to it.
yes,
but we will do some further investigation into the answer for that and ensure that is directed to you. We might even have an officer grab your direct details if we don't have that already. Otherwise, it will be published in the agenda for next
I have written a letter to the council as well, so I don't know if that requires enough.
Yes, yes, yep, we will accept that for sure.
Right.
Yep, and we'll get some further information for you, Mr. Chaplin. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do I walk away or what do I do now?
Look, if you've got nothing else to do today and you want to spend the next couple of hours, otherwise, please, we'll accept that letter on your behalf and further explore that one for you. So
thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for coming in.
Council, for your time.
Thank you. Right, and any further questions? Yep. Great. So I can see, we'll just note that Duncan's got that letter. Thank you, Mr. Chapman. Okay, there being no further questions without notice, we'll move forward to agenda item 9, which is Planning Authority. So under the provisions of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act of 1993, Council acts as a planning authority in regard to items included in agenda item 9. 9.1, which is 298 to 308 Invermay Road and 25 to 29 Condona Street in Mowbray. Business and professional services, storage, service industry, demolishment of existing buildings and construction of 21 workshop storage units and adjustment of boundaries. Before we get to the recommendation, do we have anybody noted to speak? I have a Mr. Goldsworthy who's on the list. Thank you. Mr. Goldsworthy, if you don't mind just moving to the microphone and just your name and suburb, please.
Dale Goldsworthy. I live at 10 Georgetown Road, which is about 500 metres north of the proposed development.
Thank you.
Okay, according to the Examiner, the developer bought the property in 2018. The amenity and access to the property I would consider as poor. The site's largely been unused for well over 20 years, and to my way of thinking, the developer inherited this poor amenity when he purchased the property. The traffic impact assessment for the development indicates an approximate volume of around 15,000 traffic movements per day on Invermay Road, and it would appear from the plan on page 2 of the application, the developer seeks to improve his amenity. This includes removal of parking spaces, narrowing of the southbound lane, access through a right-hand turn into the precinct, a 9 metre wide crossover, moving a bus stop, etc., etc. The 15,000 road users, or stakeholders as I'll call them, have not seen a plan for the changes on Invermay Road and have not been consulted as to the change in amenity that this may provide them on a daily basis. A greater plan for Grub Street to Hague Street needs full community consultation. The traffic impact assessment has several alarming flaws. The traffic generated from this development uses the RTA office and commercial use formula, but doesn't use the whole floor area, resulting in a 30% understatement of traffic generated. There's no discussion of traffic type, large four-wheel drives, large trucks, vehicles, trailers, equipments, backhoes, Rio mesh trailers, etc. This is salient when you look at the fact that there are zero of these vehicles in the school area, according to the TIA. Base calculations for traffic flow are based on some dubious dates. 21st of November, which is a non-uni session day for Invermay Road, and the 18th and 19th of December for Beatty Street and Cadorna Street. Accident data only reflects about 100 metres of the road reserve, and the data from other TIAs from Pitt and Sherry show there are a large number of rear-end accidents between the Uni Drive and Hague Street, consistent with erratic traffic flow and congestion. Congestion and queuing will increase with a proposed access, pedestrian island and increased heavier traffic. I strongly recommend not having the muted keep clear zone, which is in the application. The TIA is inadequate as it doesn't provide a whole impact across 500 metres each way of the proposed access on Invermay Road. Accident data also shows a high volume of accidents in the vicinity of Foss Street, which the writer says is not impacted in the proposal. Given that that's 2 car lengths from the major crossover, I do not concur with his conclusion.
Now, Mr. Goldsworthy, as the ding has gone, we'll just wrap up your time, if that's okay.
Proposal improves the amenity of the development, but there's a loss of amenity to road users. There needs to be a cohesive traffic strategy or design between Hague Street and Grub Street that's developed by council and informed by public consultation prior to approving any further developments in this area.
Thank you, Mr. Goldsworthy. Thank you. Okay, councillors, we'll move to the recommendation. So the recommendation is that council permit a permit be granted for business and professional services, service industry storage, demolition of existing buildings and construction of 21 workshop storage units and subdivision to adjacent the boundaries of the existing 2 lots at 298 to 308 Invermay Road and 25 to 29 Cadorna Street in Mowbray, subject to the published conditions. Somebody to move the recommendation. Deputy Mayor to move to start the conversation. A seconder, Councillor Pentridge. Deputy Mayor, a question to start?
Just noting Goldberg's comments, I wonder whether officers could comment in regards to the comments that he's made regarding traffic impact assessment.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's a simple matter that when we get an application like this that involves significant changes or changes to traffic movements, we often get and require a traffic impact assessment by a suitably qualified person. Now, we've received that. We frequently receive traffic impact assessments by the same individual. We're required to take on board the professional advice that's given to us. This was referred to our own engineering department and traffic experts in the infrastructure department. They're satisfied with the information we've been given. I could go on further and perhaps suggest that the plans of the actual changes and configuration to the road where car parks are lost and bus stops moved, That's only indicative at this stage. The changes to the actual physical movements on the road and the layout of the road is a matter that's determined by our infrastructure department. They make the decision in accordance with their policies and practices, and that does not of itself require approval as part of this application.
Thank you, Town Planner Duncan.
Thank you for that fulsome response. Again, I stand to talk about it and most likely support, because I don't believe we actually have much alternative based on the planning scheme. We received 78 representations in regard to this matter. Most of those related to the facade of the James Nelson building. I think there's been a number of conversations, and the comments made by the officers in the report have clearly indicated that really it is not a heritage building, therefore we don't have the ability to actually prevent the demolition of the building. Having said that, I think on page 27, the officers have, I guess, excuse me for a second while I find it, 7, have recommended in there retention of the building facade. The proponents are encouraged to delay the demolition of the facade of the James Nelson building to allow future consideration of opportunities to incorporate the facade with future development of Lot 2. Now, I note that is just notes to it, which I guess is at least putting it back in the court that we would like them to do that. They can choose whether to do that or not. And I guess in the answer to some of the representations, it sounds clear that that's not what the intention of the property owner is and a developer. But I guess depending on what the property's been developed for, it'd be great if the proponent would seek clarification from the people they're developing the property with to see whether there's any grounds which could potentially look at preserving that facade. Having said that, if you look through all of the other conditions in there about vapour, asbestos, all of the conditions that are of concern in a building site like that have been covered in the conditions that they need to meet. And I'm well aware that the EPA have been involved in the conversations with the owner in regards to the safe removal thereof. I've even spoken to the school next door who are comfortable with what's been put in place in regards to the removal of the asbestos. Having said that, is this the best thing for the site? Maybe, maybe not. It's a mixed-use area which has plenty of options in there, needed to be looked at under discretion. The discretions have been looked at and they've been determined to be appropriate. On the basis of this, I think that the owner of the property could have probably demolished before they came to the DA, but determined to put the DA and the demolition together. And we may not have even seen it at this table had it not been done in this particular manner. This has been well talked through, it's been well researched, and lots of commentary made by our officers in regards to the pertinent points, and therefore I'm in mind to support this.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Before we get to the second, a few more questions have popped up. So a question further, Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. The question is it really in regard to, I guess, our role in the planning authority, and under the objectives of the Resource Management and Planning Scheme of Tasmania, that the objectives of the Resource and Managing Planning Scheme are, and there's a number of them, but the pertinent one to this is in relation to conserve, under Part 2, to conserve those buildings, areas or other places which are of scientific, aesthetic, architectural or historical interest or otherwise special cultural value. Is it possible for you to just get one of the officers to tell us whether we should be considering that aspect of the planning scheme when we sit as a planning authority?
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Manager Richard.
The simple answer to that is no. The objectives of the Act are delivered through the preparation of planning schemes. So at the time we prepare a planning scheme, we prepare it to meet the objectives of the Act. So our planning scheme is deemed to meet the objectives of the Act when it is approved. There is no more work for those to do in assessment of development applications.
Thank you, Richard. A further question, Councillor Gibson.
Thank you. 3 questions, specifically just a question that was raised in one of the representations. It says that nowhere in the drawings does it annotate the existing building being demolished or even show the outline of the existing building. Should that have been contained within the advertised plans?
Town Planner Duncan.
Thank you. It's quite common that we would receive a specific demolition plan with an application. In this particular application, we haven't. But if you look at the plans, you can clearly see the outline of the existing buildings underlying the initial site plan. And then the one of the following plans is a large perspective plan, which clearly shows that all of those buildings have been removed. The application was for the demolition of buildings. It's not legitimately conceivable that somebody would misunderstand that those buildings were to be demolished.
Thank you, and I did appreciate that response in the written form as well, contained within your report. Also, shading diagrams relevant to the inner residential neighbouring blocks. It was considered in one representation that they were not included either.
Thank you again. The buildings that are proposed on the site are all low scale and effectively no different to a single storey dwelling. There was really considered no particular need to require extra shadow plans for this. You'll see that the proposal also includes an 1800 fence running down the boundary. The shadow from the fence will be greater than the shadow of any single storey development.
Thank you. Can we move through the questions for now? So moving to the seconder, Councillor Pentridge, to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to use this as an opportunity to keep pushing certain points. And in the last time this came up, and to make it clear, I think once again we've missed an opportunity to where that site could have been used for a lot better things. For what it's worth, I had just talked to the owner earlier on today. He would have liked other things for that site. He's as disappointed as I am that he's never been given the support. And he sort of wishes...
This is a planning approval on a particular item stage to talk about other things.
Well, maybe my colleague here, if he had driven past the place, he'd be well aware. He mentioned asbestos, he mentioned the school. Maybe he would have already realised that the asbestos has been off for a month or two and the site is ready to be demolished. And as I started off by saying, here's an opportunity where we've built a shopping centre in Mowbray. It's one of our precedents for retail and everything. And we're in the business of, we had a meeting here a while back and we were shown certain clips and the point that was made that footpaths and cars don't utilise commercial premises, but people and footpaths. And I think the presentation that we were given, all of us, was that why are we building bigger roads and smaller footpaths, wondering why our shops are going broke? Now this is, and as I said before I started, was that I will be supporting this because the gentleman has no choice. He's sat on it for 5 years. I've also talked to our Richard. We could have done more to shape that site into something that would have been a community benefit. Instead, we've allowed the rules and regulations and planning to dominate the direction it's all going in, and I think it's regrettable because, for what it's worth, ACI, who, from what I gather, are the biggest or were the contaminators of that site, they are working as hard as they can to eliminate the contamination, and maybe they could have got across the line where that site could have been used for residential people, right? Had they been given some support. And unfortunately, I don't think anyone, I don't know of any, and neither does anyone else, where they were given any support. They were left to row their boat on their own, and ultimately they've had no choice But as far as I'm concerned, put an inappropriate development in a residential area or a business area, and long term, I think we'll regret it. But for the sake of this meeting, by all means, I support it. He sat on it long enough, and he has the right to develop it and get some sort of return for it. And the other big thing that we're all missing, right, and I wish our other councillor would have a look at turning left just past that development is a thoroughfare for the majority of traffic. If you want to go to Ravenswood, you turn left there, you go down 2 blocks and you turn right. Now, the street is totally inappropriate to get round that corner. And whatever we build there now along these lines will simply make the problem a lot worse. But anyway, we'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments around the table? Further speakers or questions? Councillor Harris, then Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, this, I guess, as some of the other 2 speakers have said, is a difficult one. 78 representations. Nearly all of them talked about the James Nelson building facade because of its historic example of a post-Second World War modern industrial building. And certainly, in my mind, it is. However, as we heard from the officer, it's not listed, and as such, we have already considered its historical significance in the planning scheme, and so we have no ability under the planning scheme to stop its ultimate demolition. Ultimately, that will be the decision of the property owner and potentially his next buyer of the land or tenant, if that's what he chooses to build on there. So that is talking about the 3,000 square metre lot 2, not the lot 1, which will have the 21 workshops and garages and storage facilities built upon the balance of the land. The land in itself is in excess of 8,000 square metres, so that means there's about 5,000 square metres of which will be under the industrial workshops and storage unit development. So to me, really it falls to the developer and or his client, who may choose to ask that the facade be retained and being incorporated in whatever is to be built on the balance of that site. And if it is to be a fast food outlet, as has been suggested by our local newspaper, there are in fact many examples around the world, and in fact even in our own city here in Launceston, where the KFC in Brisbane Street is not a standalone KFC building as the one at Mowbray and Kings Meadows are, but in fact is incorporated in the historic Motors building facade. Something like that could be done with the historic James Nelson facade for a takeaway food outlet, if that is what the owner of the site and his perhaps business developer who may work with them to actually develop a takeaway food outlet. It certainly, to me, has the potential to do that, and it would be a great outcome for the city, but we have no ability to enforce that, and that's something we've got to be very much aware of. I am concerned by the traffic information as brought up by Mr Goldsworthy. I respect his opinions. He is in fact on the Council's Transport Committee, and he does bring a background of traffic engineering to the committee. And I guess you have 2 experts who are conflicted about what is proposed. And certainly 21 business units, if they are to have a retail function, shall we say, more than just a storage function, which might mean a trip in the morning to collect the gear and a trip back at night to unload it, could see rather higher volumes of traffic on Invermay Road and Cadorna Street, because I'm sure what will tend to happen is they will probably enter the site from Invermay Road and exit via Cadorna Street to get access to the traffic lights down a bit further. And so, as the planning officer said, we have one traffic engineer's report who says it can work, and we have no ability to say whether it can or can't. It's not for us who aren't experts to then say, I don't believe the report as such. So we have to take that on the face value, that it will be achievable and will not have big impact on the traffic. However, I do have my reservations about that. It certainly will remove parking spots by putting a right-hand turning lane in. There will be a reduction in the lane width through there. I do worry about the bike lane that sort of disappears and comes back again along Invermay Road anyway, that having put a right-hand turn lane in, I'm sure it's going to disappear to nothing for a while, and the bikes will just have to put up with the rest of the traffic that's trying to squeeze past that junction. And so having said that, I am still somewhat conflicted and undecided about this particular development, and I look forward to perhaps the other councillors passing on their thoughts, or perhaps even asking more questions about it to enable us to make a firm decision today.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Walker?
To start with a couple of questions, if I may. Thank you, Chair. The lot 2 access I note on the drawings is to be coming off the lot that's to be developed. Does that suppose that whatever is to occur on lot 2 would be accessing via the driveway that would be constructed as a part of this development application?
Town Planner Duncan?
Thank you. Yes, the obvious intention is that access to lot 2 will come via that. However, if we get an application in the future for a different development on there, they may choose to try and incorporate some further access directly onto Invermay Road. That would be assessed at the time, and we would have regard to further traffic impact assessments and further advice from our own infrastructure department.
Thank you.
Do the existing traffic impact assessments take into account the potential traffic movements onto lot 2 via lot 1? Or are they just assessing the presupposed use of lot 1?
Thank you again. Not being a traffic expert myself, I can only presume that they have had some regard to the traffic going on, a likely traffic or estimated traffic for lot 2. So they have a look at what's proposed, which is the number of the workshop-style buildings. They would have some regard to the obvious fact that there would be extra traffic once lot 2 is developed. However, in detail, that would be assessed at that time.
And likewise, to a point that was raised by a fellow councillor previously, these are potentially issues that are not relevant to this discussion, and I can accept that, but for the fact that on the plans it is written that new lot 2 access on the plans is prescribed there. Indeed, lot 2 does not have access off the road in these plans. So is it of concern that we are creating a lot here today that does not have street access?
No, if you look at the plans, you'll see that the existing access in front of lot 2 is to be closed. So there's an existing crossover there that will be closed off. So this was all taken into account as the traffic expert wrote his impact assessment. There's no specific concern. It was a joint decision through the applicants and in discussion with our infrastructure department to locate the access to the site as a whole, and it was the preferred outcome to have both lots accessing from that single point. However, as I noted, when an application comes in at some point in the future, it may seek to change at that time and will be assessed at that time.
Thank you very much for the responses. Chair, I do wish to speak to this item, and I'm sure people can gather by my line of questioning that I do have concerns that here we're being presented with a lot that normally I don't think that you could develop a lot without street access. It's not something that usually happens. I'm not sure if there's a law against it as such. There are certainly properties that don't have street access. This is a large lot nonetheless, 3,000 square metres with no street access, and yet plenty of street frontage. So one can only presume that, of course, at the moment, as part of these plans that we are approving today, therefore very relevant to our discussion, that any cars entering lot 2 for whatever reason, for whatever purpose, now or into the future, will be using the widened crossover that is part of this application today. That's of extreme concern because we're being, on the one hand, given a traffic assessment that I don't believe, and I may be wrong, and I don't wish to contradict our council officers, and indeed we were told that we're not sure whether the impact from Lot 2 is considered in the traffic impact assessment. My reading of it was that it was not considered in that impact assessment. Therefore, potentially, what we're approving today could have far more traffic access in the near future over Lot 1 to access Lot 2. I'm not to know. This concerns me greatly. Of course, as suggested, new access points on Invermay Road may subsequently be created in the development of Lot 2. We're not to know that. But of course, that would have implications for the proposed changes on Invermay Road, including, for example, there is a, what would you call, a pedestrian safe space halfway across the road. An admirable thing to include in this traffic amendments. But if there is to be also traffic access off Invermay Road for Lot 2, then this is of concern. If there's not to be traffic access, then it's also of concern as to how much traffic will be using that entrance. So I'd love to see some clarity around that. I can understand the argument would be, we don't know what's happening with Lot 2, so we don't have to consider that today. But nonetheless, Lot 2 is being created. Lot 2 is specified to have access over Lot 1, so it remains a concern for this decision today.
Councillor Walker, in terms of where you're at now, we can seek some clarification with an officer response to the assessment at the time of what that might look like if
Very good.
it's held appropriate.
Thank you.
Yes. So General Manager Chelsea.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. I just wanted to clarify that while we're creating the lot today, there will be another development application process. So the lot gets created, yes, through your decision or lack of decision today. Then if a person comes along and wishes to use that lot for a particular use, that will trigger another development application. At that time, we will then assess the impacts of the particular proposed use. So there's not an instance here where the lot's created and we're agreeing to, X traffic volumes based on whatever may go there in the future. There will be another opportunity and there will be a consideration at the time when we know what's going on the lot that's created today. Is that helpful?
Look, my apologies. I thought I made that clear that I understood that those considerations are not for today. What I am saying is in today's plans for approval, there is the words new lot 2 access. So regardless of what gets built there at the moment, that is what will be the approved access for lot 2. We're not to know what would develop there. We're not to know. I understand that, and I hope that I made that clear. I'm just highlighting that on the one hand, the property will give access to lot 2, but on the other hand, that's not part of today's traffic assessment. It seems like a little bit incongruous. If there was a driveway for lot 2, I probably wouldn't be talking about it, let's put it that way. But nonetheless, I would like to also speak to the process, and I might again be accused of talking about things that aren't relevant for today's discussion, but it was expressed publicly that there was a desire from this developer to have put housing on this site. There was an express opinion of this council to zone the land in such a way that it could contain future developments that would be suitable for housing in that area. Indeed, everyone would agree it's a great location, being very close to walking distance to shops and schools, that it would be a great location for housing development. So it seems everyone's in furious agreement about that. Then we have the fact in the contamination report that the neighbours are looking to mitigate the contamination effects, and it seems to have been the contamination effects that have brought us to this point. The developer wants to develop the land, was unable to develop for housing because of the contamination. Now we find ourselves in this situation. None of that may be relevant to today's discussion. We have a development in front of us, and in a purely planning point of view, this is what we are being asked to discuss and to determine. If I could have an extension, please.
Somebody to move, Councillor Walker. Moved by Councillor Harris, seconded by Councillor Pentridge. All of those in favour? That's all councillors present.
So we get to the point there where this is the outcome, desired or not, that we're presented with, and I will vote to support this today because I can see that it clearly fits the current planning scheme and the current use for this property. And I do take this opportunity to ask the developer directly to consider the community's response to the value of the building that will remain for now on Lot 2, the frontage of the Nelson Fabrics building, and to find a way that may be preserved and incorporated into a future development on Lot 2. Now, that may not be possible. Building housing on this Lot 1 may not be possible. A lot of the desired outcomes that we may all wish may not be possible. But it is time, and the first I found out about this was, of course, reading it in the paper. That's when I knew that this was happening, not 2 years ago, not 3 years ago, not 4 years ago, when investigations were going on into the suitability of the site for housing. I want those discussions. I want the last 3 or 4 years of discussions where council can find a way to proactively work with the developer to have an outcome that the whole community can embrace. I haven't had that conversation until today. So I beseech the developer to find a way forward that finds a way to meet community expectations, desires. Of course it's the developer's land. Of course the developer is free to do what they want within the constraints of the planning scheme. But let's work together as a community here. Let's have an outcome that we can all be proud of, and something that the developer can benefit from at the same time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Next speaker is Councillor Gibson.
Thanks so much for the opportunity to contribute to what appears to be quite a wide-ranging conversation. What I'd like to start with is others have referenced the article in the Examiner. From my reading of that article, I want to say first up that it came across to me that the developer spoke very highly of the partnership that they had with the council and the recognition of the contaminated soil and the working together. So I totally understand that others have got a differing perspective of that, but that was certainly the tenor of the article from my perspective. I also want to start by saying that even though the number of representations for any development application is never an indicator as to which way it should fall, that in my time here, 78 representations is a very significant number. More importantly, these are 78 individually authored, individually constructed representations. Often when you receive a large number of representations, they have been distributed by one passionate person in the community and the neighbours have been asked to put their name on the bottom of it. That is not the case. In fact, the 78 representations come from all over Australia and include some incredibly skilled and recognised architects who are experts in their field, as well as from passionate members of the Launceston community. And I think it's important to reference that. Equally, and others have said it, it's important to reference that it is considered that this proposal does indeed comply to the scheme and should be supported, noting that the 5 areas relevant for consideration are the discretionary use, setback, location of plant, design, fencing, and suitability for intended use. It references quite clearly in the officer's report that relevantly the site is not heritage listed. The officer uses the term relevantly, and I would use the term alarmingly or disappointingly, particularly with reference to the facade. Most of the 78 representations that have been received speak of wishing, if not able to keep the entire building, as is the nature of progress, to at least consider the facade and its connection to Launceston. Indeed, all of the representations, as I indicated, are very, very well written. And one that sticks out to me comes from a national organisation called the Art Deco Society of Australia, where they go to great lengths, 2.5 pages, of referencing the significance of this particular building and therefore the facade of the building to Launceston and thereby the nation. And I think it is important for us to consider and to do as Councillor Walker has done, to suggest that if indeed the proponent, when they get to the demolition and importantly when they get to the development of Lot 2, if there is any way to keep that facade, whilst it doesn't seem that it's possible for us to condition the keeping of the facade, the 78 representations, the community outcry on the Examiner Facebook page, the community outcry on a number of Launceston and national photographers' pages when they put the front of the building online, suggests that there is a will and a want. If it's not listed on a state list, if it's not listed on a local list, then it should be, everything that is possible should be undertaken to keep that facade. So if thereby the developer has seen fit to call out the way that council officers have supported them as they move to develop it for storage, then I hope there is a will and that the developer is informed that there is equally a desire for him to develop his site, but for the community to see if there is a way, to keeping that facade in the development of Lot 2. Who knows? Perhaps there's a partnership opportunity. Perhaps there's a grant opportunity. Perhaps there's even a partnering with the Launceston Historical Society. Perhaps there's a GoFundMe page or something outside the square of planning, outside the devices available to us today, that the developer themselves could call upon in order to protect that important part of Australia's national history.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. Further comments around the table or questions? Councillor McMahon.
Thank you, Mayor. Many people in our city would have memories or sentimental attachment to the James Nelson building. My mum actually worked there in the 1980s. And shortly after we moved to Launceston, and still has her reed hooks used for weaving. And my dad actually organised the shipping of product produced at the James Nelson building out of Tasmania. So I too have some connection to that building. Would I like to see the facade be incorporated in further developments? Yes, I would. But we aren't here to make decisions based on emotion or whether we think the developer has been supported or not, but by the criteria assessed within the planning scheme. The decision to keep the facade sits with the developer, and I will be supporting this today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McMahon. Further questions or comments? Deputy Mayor, a question. Councillor Gibson.
Thank you. What mechanisms are in place? What mechanisms could be in place for us to be able to communicate a strong desire from the community and from the council table to keep the facade? For example, in previous considerations of planning items, the strongly worded addition of a non-enforceable note has been possible. So what options are available to us to be able to convey the sentiment of keeping the facade within the planning remit, within the planning scheme, if any?
As pointed out by, I think, Councillor Mackenzie, there is a note to that effect. Whether it's the right wording to express the council sentiment is a judgment call for you, but there is a note to that effect.
Councillor Harris, a further question?
Yes, just a question, if I may, in regard to the number of vehicle movements associated. I've just read the traffic information report again to get my head around it, and it seemed to indicate that it was 270 vehicle movements per day would be generated by the development of the 21 units. We know that when a house has 2 or 3 bedrooms, it's 9 vehicle movements a day. What is the number that we put on a industrial complex such as this for storage and or workshops, or in fact what could be retail outlets? Because it just seems particularly low for 21 units at 270 vehicle movements a day.
In the traffic report at section 5.2 outlines the basis for the trip generation. So it's summarised in a table, and it's a function of floor area and peak hour trips to get the maximum volume in the peak hour. So if you have a look at that table, which is figure 30 in the traffic report, it sets out the floor area of each unit and then the traffic movements per day and trips in the peak hour to give you 50 in the peak hour and 270 per day. Now that's taken from the RTA Office and Commercial Premises Guidelines, which is a standard, Australian standard document that deals with these things.
Further question, Councillor Gibson?
Thank you. Further question, just subsequent to my previous question regarding the note. I understand clearly that during the assessment process, obviously there can be no process or initiation of any listing. Because it's not on the state or local list, despite the fact that it's been recommended on 2 occasions to be included. Were there any informal conversations with Heritage Tasmania pertaining to this particular site?
No.
General Manager?
I might just add to that, Councillor Gibson, that upon looking at this one, we did internally consult with our Heritage Officer, and I did direct the Manager of City Development to have an informal telephone conversation with the owner of this site with regard to the possible retention of the facade. And I also believe our Heritage Officer will undertake documentation of the site as well.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And a subsequent question. This is just in understanding it, it's not meant to be anything other. You asked the officer to have the conversation. Did indeed the officer have the conversation? And what did the developer say?
Yes, I did. I spoke to the developer. I think, in summary, if someone came along and wanted to save the facade and incorporate it, I don't think he particularly desires to knock it down, but nobody is doing that. And I think he needs to clear the site to allow the use to go ahead. And that is a significant cost to him. And so whilst he has that machinery on site, he didn't necessarily want to leave something standing, which will get progressively more vandalised and become, because it's being vandalised now, he can't keep people out of the site. What he didn't want to do, there's a window where he's open to discussion with people that want to save it, but that window is closing because he needs to make the site secure. He needs to, he's got money invested in contractors, and he doesn't want to be unnecessarily delayed for something that may or may not ever happen. I think that's the summary. But he's not necessarily, in simple terms, he's open to discussions, But absent anyone coming in and providing a positive pathway, it's his intention to progress the development.
Thanks. My final question is quite explicit. Given the 78 representations received, given the strong working relationship we have with the Launceston Historical Society, given the pages and pages of experience, contacts and support in the heritage space contained within the representations, CEO, through you and indeed the General Manager, can we, in the next couple of days, make contact with the developer, provide him with all of that expertise, all of that passion, and see indeed what opportunities could be created outside the planning context with regard to the opportunity for consideration of the saving of the facade.
Happy to do that.
A further question, Councillor Walker?
Yes, thank you. When it came to, and I'm only relying on, I won't say hearsay because it is the Examiner, I'm relying on what was reported, was that there was an intention initially to develop it as housing, but that the contamination issues became too great. What can the council offer in regards to that? I know that I've seen other development applications come through in the past where people have struggled to build on their own land because it's been adjacent to a car yard or something like that. In this case, it sounds like there's efforts being made to contain or to remediate the contamination. I'm just wondering at that stage, and I don't know when that stage was, that a decision was made not to pursue the housing idea. What efforts can the council make to help facilitate a developer in that situation? Because it's not something that we normally get to talk about. You might say that it's not relevant to this decision again, but in a sense, it's something that has come about because of this decision. And I'm happy to be corrected if there was never an intention to look at developing it in that way.
This site and a number of other sites, for example, the Margaret Street corridor, were considered by council in a number of strategic documents, probably 10 years ago, in the industrial strategy and also in our residential strategy. And the idea behind that was to try and transition from industrial uses on really well-positioned sites into more mixed-use development with underpinned by residential, changing the character of those areas into multi-storey, more intense developments. Now, that is a policy position of the council and has been for some time. In terms of there has been a historic difficulty in translating that to actually actions in the market. For example, we have car yards on sites that could be heritage. We have, this is an application for storage. That could be residential or mixed-use development. And there are lots of sites around the city that have a mixed-use zoning that could be developed for residential, but don't for economic reasons and for commercial reasons of the landowners. Now, we don't necessarily have a policy position right now to work with the owners of those sites to either subsidise or encourage them to relocate. Could we do that? We potentially could do that if we had some direction to do that, but that policy position doesn't exist right now. Certainly at the time of rezoning, and I'm going back now at the time, there was certainly discussion about what the options could be done, but in partnership with other branches of council and grant fundings and other things, but at the time it didn't actually progress to anything concrete. So at the moment, the developer is doing what he sees as the highest and best use for the site.
And just finally, and as a result, I'm glad that you mentioned those examples, Wellington Street also, where this has occurred, the use going to, and I won't call it a lesser use, but to car yards, or for mixed-use storage, industrial warehouse space, do we not run an extreme risk that these sites are going to be further contaminated and they're going to be listed, indeed car yards especially, car sales yards especially listed as contaminated sites and therefore requiring further remediation. And that would include this site as well.
Is that a question? Yeah, I think that a significant number of our inner city sites have some contamination. So it is varying degrees depending on what the prior uses were. But for example, the Margaret Street corridor and other sites would largely be subject of some contamination, and it's not unusual for brownfield sites converting to residential to have to do some contamination. It's just the land is expensive, the development is expensive, and when you add expensive remediation, it starts to get marginal to actually develop it. And that, I think that's the reality in a small regional city.
Thank you.
Further comments, questions? Deputy Mayor to close.
Thank you, and thank you for the comment. I guess there are probably three themes that have come out in today's conversation about what could have or should have been on the property. The reality is, whether I have sympathy for that or not, the reality of it is today we have an application here which, based on the officer's professional advice, have come up with the view that this is a development that should be approved. The second issue is about the facade. I think the officers in their notes have put in there about they've encouraged the owner of the property to maintain the facade. Maybe the word strongly encouraged, based on today's conversation, might be relevant to put into the word. But the reality of it is there has been some review of that. We had 78 representations who a large part were in relation to the facade. I walk around Melbourne and I see where there are iron bars holding together heritage facades while things are being built behind those. I'd certainly strongly encourage the developer to look at that to see whether there is some way that he can manage that facade by demolishing the rest of it, but leaving that standing for some future purpose. So I think that's a strong view of what I'm hearing around the table. And the third thing was really about the traffic management. I don't think in the 14 years I've been here that I haven't had at least a dozen or more traffic impact assessment analysis that have been challenged by various people. What we do is we have somebody who goes and gives a traffic assessment, which is done by the proponent. Our infrastructure advisory network go through and look at that and test it and road test it to see whether they think they're comfortable with it. They give us advice. We then make decisions on that advice. Have we been wrong in the past? There's probably opportunities that we have been, but at the end of the day, I'm not a traffic engineer. Take on board the comments made by the speaker earlier, but also note that our officers have taken into account most of the things that have been said by that proponent, by that commentator, and have come up with a decision that the roadwork network is able to cope with what goes on with this development. In relation to Lot 2, that hasn't been developed yet, it will be subject to a further development application, which at that stage will then be assessed in regards to the traffic movements in regard to that development as well. So I'm comfortable that will be dealt with appropriately at that point in time. So I believe we should be approving this today.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Putting it to the vote then, all of those in favour? Those against? So Councillor Walker against. All other councillors present in favour. The motion is carried. The next planning item is 9.2. Westbury Road and Oakton Road Prospect, Section 37(1) Planning Scheme Amendment, rezone land for low density residential to general residential. Before we get to the recommendation, any speakers? I haven't got anybody noted to speak on this agenda item. So we'll move through to the recommendation. Is that Council agrees to and initiates amendments to the Launceston Local Provision Schedule to rezone the land. I have a mover, Councillor Britton, a seconder, Councillor Gibson. Councillor Britton.
Thank you very much, Mayor, I rise to support the rezoning today, 181 Westbury Road. I personally think it's a prime location for residential development. It's within walking distance to shops, schools, your pharmacies, everything we could basically need. It's currently zoned low density, so we're only really turning that into high density anyway. There were some concerns with the site, mainly issues surrounding potential contamination and the ponding of the water on the site. A report done for council stated there was no contaminants in the soil and concluded there was no risk in moving forward with the development, and I believe that any water issues have been dealt with through upgrades or potential upgrades to the stormwater system. I believe in passing this today, we're encouraging the type of development Launceston needs. I can't see anything wrong with it, and I trust my fellow councillors feel the same way. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Britton. Councillor Gibson is the seconder.
That was covered perfectly. There's nothing further to say.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. Further speakers, Councillor Harris?
Yes, thank you. Yes, I rise to support it today. This development, currently 23 lots, will in fact expand that to probably anywhere between 50 to 70 lots. And as Councillor Britton said, its location is more suited, I believe, to being general res than low res. Low res requires 1,500 square metre blocks, larger lots, and they would be, as this probably was once on the outskirts of Launceston, it is no longer that. It is very much as part of the general residential area of Prospect and Summerhill. And so to me, this is a sensible development. It allows a developer to now lay out the new plans. The only perhaps bad or downside of that is that some of the existing lots that front onto Westbury Road may not actually benefit much from being rezoned to general res in the immediate time because of where the houses have been built based on the larger lots that they were at the time. But over time, that may change and we may see a greater densification on those particular blocks. But happy to support this and to move it forward in the next stage of the planning scheme. It won't immediately take effect, as I understand. There will be some, it will come back to us after we've rezoned it, if I'm not mistaken. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. I raised to support it as well, but I just wanted to make one footnote in regard to it because I think that the major issue to be looked at here are the natural values, which there is an overlay of vegetation in regards to the property, but I understand that that was severely damaged during storms a few years ago. And now I think, in fact, actually doesn't have any of that natural values still existing on it. So just in relation to it, I guess that'll be something interesting, whether any comment back in regard to that. But it was something that was concerning to me until I found out a little bit about what had happened up there. So I think it's a very appropriate site for a development.
Thank you, Deputy. Councillor Pentridge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't sure whether...
No.
I'd like to make a comment. Sorry, thank you. Having talked to the developers, I think it's a great idea. It is somewhat disappointing, and I mean, I'm not bringing up subjects that aren't related to other things. As per James Nelson's, I was delighted to hear today in our earlier workshop that we are starting to question a lot of things. And if this is not the appropriate time to make certain comments, then I don't know when is. But the developer needs to be, I think he'll do a good development. I think he needs to be able to get on with it. But he's being hindered somewhat. We've had an ongoing issue up there for 18 odd years in relationship to stormwater. And it seems to me that isn't enough time for us to have sorted out what we're going to do. And he is currently still waiting. He's been waiting quite some time to get on with his development. So I'd like to think that the fact that we all, or I'm assuming we all approve of it, there is things we could have done to assist our developers that spend a lot of money to be given the opportunity to get on with it once we've passed it and approved it. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Pentridge. Councillor Walker.
Yes, and while this, would have been desirable at that low density living, and I'm sure that would have been very popular, it's equally going to be, a desirable place for people and hopefully more affordable too for people to be able to live, in reasonably close proximity to the city, but extremely close proximity to the shopping centre there on a major access road. I can see this as being a very popular development if it indeed is agreed to by this table and by the Planning Commission to be returned to us in a future date for ratification. Likewise, I do encourage, I suppose it is really Taswater, isn't it, to get moving forward into, is it stormwater, it's us? For that to be concluded as quickly as possible. I suppose there is a window while this goes through the planning process for that to be, I suppose, at least ratified and a plan sort of agreed upon that will certainly have an impact on this development insofar as there may be easements required that aren't currently existing, I do believe, but that hopefully those can be expedited to the benefit of us and also to the landowner, to the developer. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Walker. Any further comments around the table? Councillor Britton to close.
Thank you. Nothing more to say.
Great, thank you. Okay, putting it to the vote then. All of those in favour? That is all councillors present. The motion is carried. Okay, council no longer sits as planning authority as we move through the agenda to announcements by the Mayor at 10. 10.1 is acting Mayor's announcements. Handing over to you, Deputy Mayor.
Really straightforward that I attended on your behalf, Mayor. I think St Florian's Day,
Councillors,
International Firefighters Day was a really moving with one of the a posthumous awarding of bravery to one of the firefighters who actually resided in Western Australia but came out of Launceston, which was absolutely fantastic for the family to get closure on that matter. I think I attended the speech and drama section of the Launceston competitions also. So anybody who wants to sort of get popular, apparently the best thing to do is walk around with your fly undone and people will look at you all day. It was a beautiful piece that was presented on that on that night. So our drama is well and truly supported around Launceston. I look forward to seeing some of them around this table at some future date. But look, it's been a fantastic week. We did the Mother's Day ceremony up at Carvilla, which was very moving for me to go back there for personal reasons. But I think it was very well done by our staff at Carvilla, and I think shows the care and attention they actually take to the people that they look after and the families that they look after going into that site. And the Mighty Hawks won.
Thank you. Moving forward to councillors' reports at 11. Any councillors like to report? Councillor Palmer?
Thank you very much, Mayor. On Saturday the 4th, I attended the Ravenswood Bowls Club annual presentation dinner. Such a family-focused club. Congratulations to all involved. Thank you to the club committee, Carleen, Ian and Acting President Robin. The bowling green is looking incredible, thanks to the City of Launceston staff who have assisted with the work done on the bowling green. So well done to the City of Launceston for all you do for the Ravenswood Bowls Club. And last week I called into the Starting Point Neighbourhood House for the Community Health and Wellbeing event. Basically an event to get to know your neighbours. Lots of different care providers were there, helping community members in relation to many things. Hearing tests, digital skills, homelessness providers. Also, it was great to run into and have a chat with Ray Green from the City Mission, who also does lots of great work, including the wonderful work he does with Project North, transforming communities. So, wonderful neighbourhood house, the Starting Point Neighbourhood House, and I'd just like to single out Nettie Burr up there, who does amazing things on a daily basis for so many people in the community. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. Along with yourself and the Deputy Mayor, I attended the opening soiree at the Australian Musical Theatre Festival, 5-day festival here in Launceston, celebrating all things about Australian musical theatre. And it was great to hear a couple of performances that we saw there last night, including one from the Launceston College choir. And I think, that the talent that was shown in that choir says that musical theatre will be alive and well in Launceston for quite a few years going forward. And of course, it is something that is unique, I think, to Launceston in Australia, that we have the musical theatre festival here. And while it has been going 5 years, it isn't particularly well known, and we need to perhaps make sure we embrace it, and particularly as residents who live in the city, take the opportunity to not only go and see local theatre productions that might be put on by Encore and others, but to perhaps go to this event as well and really take up the opportunity to see Australian musical theatre at its very best here in our own city. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Further reports from councillors? Okay, there being none, no further. We'll move forward to councillors' questions at 12. 12.1, councillors' questions on notice. We'll see 12.1.1, Councillor Pentridge with the mobile sleep pods. 12.1.2, around also the equilibrium of silt in the Tamar River estuary. At 12.1.3, Councillor Gibson, around formalised access for all ability toilets. And 12.1.4 also with the racism and the inquiry into the international student and tourism sector. 12.2, councillors' questions without notice. Any questions? Councillor Walker?
Yes, thank you. I note the ongoing works at the Launceston General Hospital, including the demolition of the Anne O'Byrne Centre. Will the state government be submitting a plan for the roads in that area? Have we had any discussions about improving the traffic movement in that area, considering the intersections, especially of Howick Street and Mulgrave Street, but also Howick Street and Charles Street, where there would also be potentially another multi-storey car park in the future? It seems as though these developments, while the demolition has been approved, the certain buildings have been approved, such as the extension for the helicopter landing, without having to go through this council, so I can only presume they've been approved through planning without any objections. But there's these further works. Have there been discussions about traffic movements in the area?
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Acting CEO?
Obviously, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, there was a South Launceston parking precinct plan that was developed in conjunction with Department of Health at the time and the Health Hub. And that's been endorsing a lot of the parking requirements. I guess the parking's what drives the traffic, but there hasn't specifically been done any traffic studies in conjunction with the state.
Yeah, well, I suppose especially it would be the corner of Howick and Mulgrave Street that is of concern, because it would appear the access into the back of the hospital, I suppose, adjacent to Mulgrave Street, that corner itself, I seem to remember some discussion about a roundabout or some kind of traffic control in that area. I just wondered if we could get any feedback from, is it State Growth, the Health Department, whoever it is, who's obviously moving forward with their plans, and yet there's been no addressing of specifically that intersection, but also if the multi-storey car park's going in on the corner of Charles and Howick, then similarly I imagine traffic movements there. Yeah, statement more than a question. Thank you.
Yeah, look, we'll engage with Department of Health and find out what their plans are.
Cool. Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Pentridge?
Mr Mayor, the question's really to our acting CEO. It's in relationship to the matter I brought up, which was the silt. The question I'd like to ask is, does this council see itself with any responsibility in relationship to the marina and the silt that's continuing to build up? That was the first question. I'll ask the three of them and then I can sit down. Secondly, if yes or no, has anyone approached the other person that we believe is responsible, which is our famous developer, Mr. Errol Stewart? Has anyone ever talked to him about his plans and what he's going to do with the ever-increasing amount of silt? And I think we'll just finish with those two, because I think somewhere along the line I have had some conversations and I'm relieved that coming winter now, our problem's going to go away. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pentridge. So, question around council responsibilities and those who have stakeholder status with the marina.
So I believe council has made their position very clear on the Tamar Estuary. They've adopted a vision that's been developed with lots of expertise and over many years engagement with stakeholders in terms of the community and users of the estuary. From my perspective, I believe that is council's position, endorsed position, which very clearly states that the estuary is extremely important to our community and to us. In terms of stakeholders, I must say we have ongoing discussions with people like Errol who are regular users and others around their use and plans and challenges. But I must say as an organisation we have made a decision that we're not going to be undertaking dredging or silt raking any further.
Well, isn't that sort of, look, I'm sorry, but I can't. So we are leaving the marina to whoever, well, obviously the owner, because we will not be contributing or helping him, and he can do whatever he wants with it. Is that what we're saying?
What I'm telling you is what council's the position that council has made. It's not my position; it's the position of this council. If you feel that is not the right position, that's upon you as a councillor.
No, I was actually asking, has anyone
discussion.
consulted Mr. Stewart or Errol in the last 1 month, 2 months, 5 months, 6 months? Has anyone talked to him? And just to sort of get a bit of feedback. I mean, I've been, I'll use the word squawking, it's probably not the right word, but for lack of a better way of putting it, because I've got some grave concerns about what's happening down there, and so have a lot of other people. But really, my understanding is that nobody seems to care. So I think someone should care, because it's becoming disgraceful down there. And if we are the representatives of this community, I think it's time we started at least asking some questions and seeing what we can do to assist the matter. I would have thought that would have been our responsibility as elected members of this community. So,
thank you, Councillor Pentridge. Any further questions without notice? Okay, there being none, or no further, we'll move forward to notices of motion. 13.1, notice of motion, family violence, put forward by Councillor Palmer. So, Councillor Palmer, I might take you as the mover. A seconder, Councillor McMahon. Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor. Over the past few months, the horror of domestic violence has sent shockwaves through our country. Most of us would be quite familiar with the statistic that one Australian woman dies at the hands of a partner, former partner, or someone known to her every single week. But the death of 3 women from the same area just weeks apart unleashed such a wave of sadness, then anger, reminding us that violence against women remains rife. No one is immune. Violence doesn't discriminate depending on your postcode or occupation. And while violence against any person has never been and will never be acceptable, we know women are far more susceptible to seeing acts of violence against them. It's also important to remember that abuse in a family does not always leave a bruise. Coercive control, financial abuse. There are unfortunately a number of ways that family violence manifests itself. I've been advised that the City of Launceston has a number of initiatives in place to support any employee experiencing family violence. There are posters around workspaces outlining the support available, brochures to hand to employees, and an internet site for employees that lists the information and, in addition, provides a link that provides information regarding accessing the federal government escaping violence payment. We do not provide respectful relationship training to our employees that is specific to family violence. While I'm advised, the Council does provide training around values-aligned behaviours in our workplace, bullying and harassment, we are not providing respectful relationship training to employees or elected members. Over decades, we have seen huge attention and investment in support for victims of domestic violence. However, we know prevention is better than a cure. We are seeing in our schools respectful relationship programs being rolled out. So what if a similar program was rolled out across workplaces? It has been so encouraging to hear about some of the programs going into our schools, teaching children about what a respectful relationship looks like, the way we speak to one another, the way we should listen. So what about in our workplaces? How are we ensuring that those around us in this workspace also have the opportunity to see what a respectful relationship looks like? It seems in this workplace we are supporting people in knowing where they can go to get help. Can we not consider how we can take a further step to help our people identify when they are not in a respectful relationship, whether that be a victim or a perpetrator? In light of the recent events, which has seen such an outpouring of grief right across our country, our state, and indeed our beautiful city, I'm asking for councillor support to start the process of embedding into our management of current staff, new staff, and councillors a respectful relationships program. When a new staff member or councillor begins, I would like to see such a program as part of the onboarding and induction starting from July 1, 2024. I accept this is a very tight time frame. However, we cannot pretend we are not in a crisis. I don't believe we need to reinvent the wheel. We can look at what other jurisdictions do using the resources of some of Tasmania's own exceptional services. There may be some resourcing required which we shouldn't shy away from. An investment in prevention will always outweigh the cost of finding a cure. We must lead by example. We must act immediately. I seek my fellow councillors' support and ask you to vote in favour of this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer. Councillor McMahon is the seconder.
Thank you. 64 women died at the hands of an intimate partner in 2023. 30 women have already died this year at the hands of a man. 1 in 7 women and 1 in 25 men have been injured by an intimate partner. And among G20 nations, Australia ranks 8th for the rates of domestic violence against women. Something not to be proud of. As mentioned, in 2020, a notice of motion was brought by Mayor Albert Van Zetten for officers to develop a domestic and family violence strategy for adoption by council. We are now in 2023 and many lives across Australia have been lost in that time to domestic violence. I'm in full support of Councillor Palmer's motion and look forward to seeing council strengthen its training and support and including respectful relationships training and being part of the change we all hope for in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McMahon. Councillor Gibson.
Thanks so much, and I too want to thank Councillor Palmer for bringing forward this motion, and on behalf of Councillor Dawkins, she asked that I contribute that she says this is such important work to happen at the beginning rather than at the end. I think what Councillor Palmer is asking us to do is, at the very minimum, the opportunity for us to show some leadership in this space. We're a very large employer and the opportunity for councillors and staff to receive additional training, additional opportunity for learning, in addition to what already takes place, which is great in terms of values-based behavioural learning. This is just the next step, and I think it will appropriately be received by our staff and will show other organisations who are just setting out at the beginning of their journey what it is that they too could do in this space. I want to, for the benefit of councillors, note that one of the previous council staff who was here at the time almost completed the strategy for council, and I'm told that it just needs some peer review. and indeed then could become a strategy of council in addition to this work. It's in the file, and due to COVID, it was not finalised. But the previous council staff member who was here at the time suggests that it only needs that little body of work to be undertaken, and that too could be further action that this organisation can take. But I want to really applaud Councillor Palmer for taking this opportunity to bring an important matter before us, and I'm sure it will be supported by councillors around the table and the opportunity for us to show leadership in this space.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. Deputy Mayor, then Councillor Walker.
Thank you. Look, I'm saddened to be standing here in 2024 and have to talk about such issues, but I acknowledge in recent events just unfortunately just cement the need to do things like this. So I stand to commend Councillor Palmer in bringing the recommendation to Council today, and certainly we're fully supporting it.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Walker.
Sure, sweet. I was still gathering my thoughts via you, Chair, Councillor McKenzie, but certainly I will, vote to support this. And it's a privilege that the council has to be able to instigate these types of things. That not every business, not every organisation has the capacity or the funding or the expertise or whatever it may be. Now, having said that, it would appear as though we might have fallen into that same category with a previous motion from our previous mayor, but one seeking officers develop a domestic and family violence strategy for adoption by council. And I hear by you, Chair, Councillor Gibson, mention that strategy is mostly complete, so that will expedite the process. There's nothing like a little bit of sunlight to provide some disinfectant on a wound, and in this case, it's a subject that does need to be a light shine upon it. It's a subject that thrives because people do suffer shame. They don't wish to share their personal experiences in that way. And I think anything that we can do to bring these things into the public eye, or the public sphere, shall we say, to make people feel okay about confronting and discussing whatever traumas that they might have faced or are facing, is a good thing. It needs to be normalised in that respect, in terms of our conversations, in terms of what we are prepared to discuss. It certainly also needs, and I'm sure it would normally go without saying, but in this case we have to say it needs to be condemned on every level that people are suffering different forms of abuse in their personal relationships. Certainly the federal government has taken actions in this regard and have recognised that there's a desperate need for funding, particularly for people who are wishing to remove themselves from those situations. And by and large, that is one of the biggest roadblocks for people, is just being able to afford to remove themselves from that situation. It's not as if many people don't know that these things are wrong, but that opportunity is limited. So having said all that, in that respect, it would appear as though council may have additional responsibilities there. What they are exactly, I suppose we'll find out through this process. But part of that could be helping to facilitate what we are doing internally for other organisations over time. If we have the capacity to develop this type of education for our own staff and councillors, then we should have the capacity to be able to share that further, at an affordable cost for other organisations, or to facilitate it in the community through different avenues, whether it be educational institutions, healthcare centres, or the like, community organisations. We should have that ability to be able to facilitate that. But further to that, we have to then consider, it's, perhaps a little bit to my, close to my heart, something like homelessness, where we have to consider what material contribution we can make, as the federal government have recently done. And while on the one hand commentators who are close to the issue have said yes, and that is still not enough. We need more. On the other hand, something is better than nothing. And from a council's point of view, if there are ways that we can contribute that will alleviate people who are finding themselves in this situation, then I would be all supportive of that. It has to be in such a way that is community-based. It fits the council's particular directive, which is to look after the welfare of the people in our community. That is part of what we... I note here that, of course, it meets the strategic objective also of priority 3, that we're a progressive leader that is accountable to our governance obligations and responsiveness to our community. But I am quite sure that we're also responsible for the welfare of our community. I don't know which strategic objective that is, but I'm sure it's there somewhere. And so in that respect, I wouldn't be against, in the future, that material contribution from council, whether it be through offering what is suggested here to a broader audience, or whether it is indeed through other material contributions, whether it's to organisations that are assisting people who are suffering, or other means, is yet to be seen. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Pentridge?
Thank you. I have to agree totally with what's been put forward. At the same time, and I don't mind being the lone voice, it's not our role. We've got a lot of good organisations out there, and this reminds me of another thing that's come up here recently. We're here to manage the city. We're treading on very thin ice when we start interfering with either our employees or generally. I think we should, and I'd be a supporter, and ultimately it's how we word. I think I'd be disappointed if we weren't all 100% in agreement with what Councillor Palmer has said and Councillor McMahon, but I don't think it's council responsibility. We've got too much on our plate. We're struggling to service the community as they would expect us to service them. To take more things on that we do not have any expertise in, I think is a bad step. Now, I will be supporting it. At the same time, I think we better think carefully how it's worded. We've got a lot of expert people out there in our community that are doing a lot of work in this area, and I would support 110% that we contribute to those things and make our views known to them. But as far as setting up something within house, I don't think it would work. Thank you.
A question, Councillor Gibson?
Thank you. Just as a point of clarification, it's my understanding from the notice of motion that in fact we would potentially be buying in a service or a provider who is an expert in this space, or at least buying in the program to be able to replicate in subsequent sessions. Is that the understanding of the CEO? Obviously, appreciating the differing interpretation of the motion.
That would be my intent in delivering this outcome.
Thank you.
Councillor Britton?
Thank you very much, Mayor, and I just want to commend Councillor Palmer for bringing this to the table today, and I am in full support and just felt like it was important to note that it is our job to represent the community, and it is very clear that the community have overwhelming views that not enough has been done in this space, and I believe by doing this we are showing them that we are representing them well, and we should be, and I will be doing that today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Britton. Any further comments around the table?
Chair, it just seems like the numbering in at least the electronic version of this report is in the recommendation goes numbers 1, 2 and 3, and then the motion has numbers 4, 5 and 6. I know it seems like it's sort of continued on. It's just on page 73 and page 74 of the electronic version of the document. Okay. Just might be a syntactical error.
Sure. My printout version is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. Thank you, though.
I'm obviously behind the times here.
Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, thank you, Councillor Palmer and McMahon, for bringing this motion to it. Like the others, I'll be supporting it. I would hope that, Council has nearly 600 staff. If each one of those people then went and spoke to 10 others about what they learned in their training, then very quickly domestic or family violence, I think we're calling it domestic family violence, could be addressed in our society. It is, in fact, a scourge that has grown. For many years it was kept quiet. It's just what you accepted in a marriage behind the front door. It's no longer the case, but there are still many perpetrators and many families that are subject to it on a regular basis, and we need to do everything we can to push the word out, push that training out into our community, and hope that one day we will then be perhaps rid of this scourge. And it does require men, and men of all type, because it is men that are the main perpetrators, but not exclusively, to step up and call out their mates if they understand or know that their mates might be doing the wrong thing against their loved ones. Thank you.
Councillor Harris. Further comments? Councillor Palmer to close.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor, and thank you to my fellow councillors for all your support. Thank you, Councillor Harris. And I would just like to acknowledge that it is a hard topic for a lot of people. And if anyone is out there listening, I just want you to know that we are, as you can see, doing everything we possibly can to play our part. And I'll just, in my closing words, violence against women is a national disgrace. And whilst the City of Launceston has a number of initiatives in place to support employees experiencing family violence, we don't have a Respect for Relationships program. And given the unprecedented national figures on domestic and family violence, I believe the City of Launceston can and should do more. And once again, I do thank all my fellow councillors for your support, and I seek you to vote in favour of this motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer. Okay, putting it to the vote then, all of those in favour? That is all councillors present. The motion is carried. Moving through to committee reports at 14. 14.1 is the Homelessness Advisory Committee report. The recommendation is that Council receives the report from the Advisory Committee meeting held on the 9th of April. I've noted Councillor Walker to move, seconded by Councillor Pentridge. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Chair, and I do take pleasure in acknowledging that as Chair of the Homeless Advisory Committee, the HAC, we have begun meeting again after a hiatus earlier in this year. We meet with a large committee that represents various government departments, welfare, community groups, as well as community members who have experienced homelessness, researchers, and of course council staff and councillors. So that discussion at the last meeting, because while the committee was in hiatus for a few months, the Northern Community Action Group, which is also sort of facilitated by the council, which is just a fortnightly meeting of stakeholders just working on the practical matters of who does what, who can provide blankets, who can provide food, who can provide shelter, whatever it might be, on a needs-by-needs basis, is coordinated. And, we certainly have looked to ways that subgroup, if you like, informal group, can report back to the advisory committee, because quite often what comes from that group is that there is a lack of services in a certain area, or a lack of goods in a certain area. We have, winter approaching, and certainly while the report, the customer service request report is there of 80 relating to homelessness, for 2024. That's certainly something that has stabilised. It's not something that's necessarily reducing, and therefore it is obvious to everyone that the issue of homelessness is something that is with us for the foreseeable future. While services work within their own confines to achieve what they do and are funded to do that, and council's not, I accept that, I will continue to encourage my fellow councillors to adopt or to consider adopting that council make more material commitments to the services that we can provide people who, for whatever reason, find themselves in a situation where they can't access the things that they need to survive this winter. That may be a roof over their head, that may be blankets, that may be a tent, that may be clothing, that may be a shower, that may be a toilet, that may be food. Now, these things are provided by services, but for one reason and another, people can't always access them directly through those services. And while Launceston Council, and don't get me wrong, we are significantly contributing through our partnership with St Vincent de Paul at the former YMCA building in Kings Meadows, which is providing laundry, showering, food services for people who find themselves homeless. It's certainly a decentralised area, and I think that while there are services provided closer to the CBD, because generally you'll find that more people who don't have a roof over their heads are closer to built-up areas, I'm still of the firm opinion that we continue to seek out possibilities for council to provide centralised services, if not directly, then in assisting other services to provide that service to our community. And quite often it can be the case that these services are provided to everyone, not just people who find themselves homeless. So if it is a shower, it's a shower that anyone can use. If it is a washing facility, you might have a house, you might have a room, you might have a couch at your grandmother's house where you can live, but you don't necessarily have a place to do your washing. So when you start to think of things in that way, you start to realise times have changed. They're not going back to the way that they were. There is a visible issue, and any contribution we can make like that, when the need arises, is something that will to help alleviate, of course, first and foremost, for that person who is found wanting, but also for our broader community, to let them know that we are contributing materially further to alleviating those problems. I commend anyone who wishes to, I recommend to anyone who wishes to know more to have a look at the report.
Thank you. Councillor Walker. Councillor Pentridge is the seconder. Sure, thank you. Any further commentary around the table, around the report? There being none, anything further to close, Councillor Walker?
Just a little, if I may. Thank you, Chair. I'll just note that also Council continues to work on a way to have an administrative impact in terms of what we call a by names list, which is a way of council having an acknowledgement of an understanding of any the numbers of homeless people that we have and any variations in that, but also to develop technologies that will assist both, of course, homeless people to be able to report their needs, but also then, therefore, council to be able to monitor that and to say, okay, there is a shortage of blankets, or people are struggling to, access showers or laundries or whatever it may be. That there's a communication system that is, what would you say, a civic-minded communication system that is outside particular services who have their own ways of doing that with their own clients, but that we are doing as a society that keeps us informed as to the needs of people who find themselves homeless. So I suppose I'll just highlight that to let people know the behind-the-scenes work that is being done that doesn't always get talked about publicly or reported on in the media, because it's nuts and bolts sort of work that needs to be done for us, to our officers, to have an ongoing understanding of how we can assist. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Okay, putting it to the vote. All of those in favour? That is all councillors present. The motion is carried. Looking now at agenda item 15, which is Organisational Services Network. 15.1 is 23-24 budget amendments. So this one is that council by absolute majority approves the following changes: 23-24 statutory estimates around revenue, expenses and capital works expenditure. It's been moved by Councillor Harris, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. This is the budget amendments for the month of April. There's a few worth noting, and I guess we see money being moved from capital to operations and operations to capital. A couple of examples: the new NTCA indoor nets, $11,880, whilst initially shown as capital, didn't meet the capital requirements, so it became operational. And similarly, some new tractor equipment and audio equipment that was purchased for York Park was originally down as operational, is now capital, making a amount of $22,150. And some good news that a federal grant from the federal government, from our communities fund, has been given to the Ravenswood Skate Park for improvements there. So we had to include that additional revenue in the budget for this. So hopefully there's not too much more discussion on it, but hopefully our members will support these changes to our budget.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Deputy Mayor is the seconder. Nothing further? Any comments around the table? Anything to close? Moving it to the vote. All of those in favour? All councillors present. Motion is carried. At 15.2, we have the City of Launceston Annual Plan 23-24 progress against annual plan actions for period ending 31st of March. Recommendation is that council notes the progress and it looks at the actions listed as the percentage. Somebody to move. Councillor Harris, seconder. Councillor Walker. Councillor Harris.
Thank you. Once again, a quarterly update, I think we get on this, of how we're going against the annual plan, which shows the very many areas that our plan is across, from economic strategy to transport, smart cities, Aboriginal partnership. It's all there for people to read. And we are really only noting the report on this, and so I guess it does open the opportunity for any councillors to ask questions of what a 75% attainment or completion rate on the Northern Tasmania Economic Development Strategy, for example, may actually mean. If not, we'll just note the report and pass it on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Walker is the seconder. Nothing further. Councillor Gibson.
Thanks so much. I want to say it's really great to receive this report, and it feels like there's just a little more detail here, which is appreciated. I think there is a way for us to look at the way that we report on our annual plan, and indeed the strategies and plans that sit below that in a more kind of full way into the future. Nonetheless, this reflects the great work that's undertaken. I also look to some of the annual plan actions regard the development of the plan, but then in subsequent years, in some cases, there is no action for the implementation. So I draw your attention, for example, the implementation of the first year of the 4-year action from the cultural strategy. I think, to my thinking, that's a really good way of tracking the way that we develop strategies and plans, and that could be a model moving forward. And the only reason I mention it is we know that, as Councillor Pentridge has said in a previous item, the amount of work that council is doing is never ending. It continues to grow. And it feels like in some instances, one department has the annual plan project that is the development of a facility, for example, but then another department or another part of council has the action of bringing that to life. So I use, for example, the bike centre as an example. The annual plan action says that we will open the bike centre or finish the bike centre, which is absolutely the case, and that will be a capital project. But nowhere in the annual plan will it say, or nowhere in the draft annual plan does it say, for example, that we will be able to resource the staff required to bring the booking procedure and the open day and the marketing of that plan to life. And so I guess what I'm doing is saying and suggesting that everything that we do requires resource, and it doesn't just magically happen. So I think there's a way for us to ensure, like we have with some actions, that it's not just that the strategy is completed and we report that it's 75% on the way to being completed or adopted, but that we can follow it through. And I think there's some really good examples of that. An example being we continue to roll out the ABCDE learning site. We implement the action plan for access framework. Now, if you looked at all of the actions in that 2024, I think it was 2022 framework, and there's a score of 60%. I'm not sure how we get there or how we got there, but I think that idea of tracking through plans and strategies moving forward is certainly something that I'd be really keen for us to do. Finalise and commence implementing a master plan for the Northern Tasmanian Cricket Association precinct and associated action plan. You could look at that and you could say, wow, we're 75% of the way of achieving that incredible NTCA plan. And of course, that's not what it means because we haven't done anything yet. We have achieved some money for tennis, which we're annexing to the agreement, which is good, but there's still a whole lot of work to do in that space. So I think what I'm wanting to do is to ensure that we recognise the resource required once the plans have been created, once they've been endorsed, once they've been finalised, because as we see, there is a huge amount of work happening and it's important across all of the actions that the whole picture is provided. So as we come to the draft annual plan, I think it's at the next workshop or the workshop after that for the next year, that's going to be some feedback that I'll be providing. But again, this represents the huge amount of work undertaken across the organisation, a snapshot of that, and I think goes to great detail, explaining where some of our most strategic projects are at, but also where additional work is required, additional funding, additional renewal of plans and strategies in order to continue achieving things that we see for our community. So I thank the officers for the work, thank them for the scores, and look forward to interrogating what our next draft annual plan finally looks like at the next workshop.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. Any further comments around the table? Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, look, I just think the amount of work that goes into reporting on these annual returns and these updated reports, I think just acknowledging there is a significant amount of work going there, acknowledge the comments that Councillor Gibson has made, and also likewise, I'd have a few little bits and pieces and maybe just workshopping outside just where things like our strategy for open space interlinks with the sports and the sporting and recreation facilities and making sure that they're talking to each other. But fundamentally, look, thank you for the work you do. Again, that clarification as to what 75% means, particularly in NTCA, Princess Theatre, it's a particular phase, which will then go into another phase. So I think it's really important that we understand that as well and it's clear to the community when they read it.
Thank you. Further comments? Anything, Councillor Harris, to close? Okay, putting it to the vote then. All of those in favour? That's all councillors present. The motion is carried. 16, closed council. The recommendation that council moves into closed session to consider the following matters. 16.1 is confirmation of minutes. 16.2 is the Northern Regional Tennis Centre Clubhouse and Community Events Centre project of items. Where am I? 16.3 is councillor's leave of absence, and then we close the session. So somebody to move that we go into closed session, please. Councillor Mann, seconded by Councillor Harris. All of those in favour? That is all councillors present. The motion is carried. Okay, councillors. As we're now back in open session, just somebody to move that the table is as described as what we spoke of in closed session. Somebody to move the table. Councillor Palmer, seconded by Councillor Harris. There it is. All those in favour? All councillors present, the motion is carried. Closure of meeting, and the next one will be here on the 30th of May at 1 p.m.